Okay, good afternoon, Washington University of Science Technology students, instructors, special guests. We're delighted to have you attend our free webinar today, led by Ms. Yasmin Virani, who is the founder and CEO of her own company, Yas Consulting Services. So, Yasmin, we are delighted, excited, overjoyed to have you talk to us today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It may be a new topic for many of our students. So we look forward to having you present today. We look forward to students asking questions. I know that Ms. Virani has some videos, some exercises to guide us through this diversity, equity, and inclusion mindset. Ms. Virani, the virtual podium is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark and Washington University of Science and Technology. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and talk about this topic. Like Mark said, I want this to be a two-way conversation. This won't just be me talking for an hour. So really excited to have some engagement, whether it's people wanting to get off the microphone and say something or even use the chat box. So here we are. Interestingly, here we are a day after Valentine's Day. And as I was thinking, when I had put the slide cover together and thought about, what is the title of this webinar, this chat going to be? And, Mark, Amit, and others, we all settled on diversity as a mindset. Are you willing to change your mind? And coming off of Valentine's Day, I was actually like, oh, I think it's a little bit of, are you willing to change your heart and your mind? So just wanted to kind of add that on the heels of Valentine's Day. Hopefully everyone celebrated in some way, with family, friends, and others. So Amit, if you can please go to the next slide. Great. So really quick, I just wanted to go through the agenda of what we will be talking about today. I'll talk a little bit about, myself and my background, nothing too extensive because I want to keep the discussion focused on what we're here to talk about today, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And like Mark said, there may be some of you that may have heard, about this already through social media, and other things that you may be reading or coming across. And today I want to come at it from a different angle than maybe what you would have already heard. So that's why I called it, let's demystify DEI, right? Let's define each of those terms, but really go through an exercise of fully understanding what these things could mean to you as an individual. And then at the same time, reflecting upon what those could mean for you as a student and then further on within your career. So, as you can see, why does it matter to me now? How do you go about creating a culture of respect and empathy, and how it will help you in your career? So we will hit upon all of those and have a wonderful conversation. So next slide, please. Okay, so Mark, I know shared a little bit about myself, and I can do that a little bit more here on this slide. I identify as a Pakistani American. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, which is a whole nother topic I'm sure that you have seen in terms of people using their pronouns, in terms of their gender identity. Other identities of myself, and we will talk about this more when we do the diversity exercise, is I'm a wife, I'm a mother of 2 kids, I'm also a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a professional, I'm all these things that make me who I am. In terms of my actual business, I am very passionate about this topic, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I kind of came upon it through all my 20 plus years of experience within business consulting, human capital, and all of those things. And June of last year, I actually launched my own consulting practice. And my value proposition is that I would like to really focus on small to mid-sized businesses, whether they're nonprofit, government, or for-profit, in helping them within their DEI journey. So a little bit about me. So let's now move on to what we are here to talk about. So the intentions for today's session. So I'm going to take a moment here so that everybody can sort of look at this slide and think about what it is that you will be taking away from today. And it could be maybe one thing from here, or it could be everything from here, or a combination of things. Think about how you want to understand the foundation of DEI. What are some of those core concepts that we'll talk about? Challenge yourself a little bit further than what you may already know and what your preconceived notions may be about DEI, whether positive, negative, or neutral. Thinking about how you can be much more inclusive in the way that your actions or your behavior or your words presume you to be. And then relax and have fun, right? Like I know that school's tough, everyone's busy. So let's use this opportunity to just relax, open your mind and heart, learn something new, and maybe share something if you like. All right, next slide. Okay, so in terms of demystifying diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's first talk about the first of those within the acronym. So I also don't want to make any assumptions here. When we say DEI, that's the acronym for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what we'll do is we'll kind of break down each of those, like I had said, demystify them, and talk about them a little bit more. So before I do have a video clip that I want to show for this, but before I do that, I want to just sort of talk about what is diversity, right? And what I want to say here is that a lot of times people, when they think about diversity, think of immediately, your outward physical attributes, right? So your race, your gender identity, your ethnicity, anything that may be visible to a person that is different, right? And that's fine. A lot of people tend to think of diversity that way. What I want you to think about today is let's go beyond that. Let's go beyond the physical attributes of being different and think about many different aspects of diversity. So I don't know if you can see those concentric circles on that graphic, but in addition to the physical attributes, they have things like your culture, your personality, your language, your thoughts, how you grew up, whether, in a rural environment, in an urban environment, like how was your childhood? Like all of these things. What is your mental health status? All of these different things are also part of diversity. So I'm gonna, I love the video clip and I don't want to say too much before we talk about the video, but I want everyone to sort of open their mind when they see the video, and then we're going to actually come back and do an exercise. So Amit, if you can please show the first video.
That people have and like their backgrounds.
To me, diversity is almost the first step, if you will, towards a more just and equal world. Diversity should ideally lead to inclusion, and then equity, and then through all of that, social justice.
I think it's the physical differences, so like race, gender, sexuality, age, but also like the different experiences people bring, the ideas that people have and like their backgrounds.
To me, diversity is acknowledging
and highlighting everyone's values, no matter what that they bring to the table, whatever type of ability that they have.
Diversity is important, whether that be we're talking like ideology, like a difference of ideas and perspectives, whether it be ethnic backgrounds and different perspectives of cultural communities, religious backgrounds. I think diversity is important to, informing like the whole person, like we say here, and things like that. Because if you really just stick to one perspective and aren't aware of any others, how much are you really growing? How much are you really developing as a person?
Diversity is difference. And the way that I really see diversity is that there are those socio-cultural differences like race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religious preference, and religious traditions. But there's also difference in thoughts. And I think college is that time where students are getting the opportunity to really question what that difference is. I feel like a lot of people, when thinking about diversity, means like ethnicity, but to me, because like I don't really know what I am besides Black, African American, I kind of relate that to like my interests or school, my family, just anything like that.
Diversity, I see it as just a mix of backgrounds, different experiences coming together. On campus we see it in terms of ethnicity and different like family lives, just people coming from different places and sharing their culture with each other.
A lot of people kind of interpret it as you have to be a person of color to be considered diverse, and I think that's problematic. Obviously, like race and ethnicity matter, and those are totally parts of your identity. But I think religion and politics, and sexual identity, and income, and all of those things, I think they all really kind of contribute to who we are and what we contribute to campus and our community. Diversity is, I think, celebrating the differences between you and other people, but using those differences to really celebrate the similarities between you and someone else.
To me, maybe diversity is just more like experiencing different backgrounds that you're not really familiar with and learning, and maybe even like taking some of that and like making it your own unique diverse background.
From a teacher's perspective, a diversity of voices, viewpoints, perspectives on a particular subject area is critical. Without it, I don't think you can actually have a teaching and learning environment.
Diversity is recognizing, appreciating, and learning from every person's individual difference that they bring to wherever they are. Just acknowledging that everyone brings something different to the table and really engaging with and learning from those differences and appreciating what our community can gain from those differences, and that those differences don't all fit in the same box. So please join the conversation. And if that means, if you joining the conversation means that you have to be quiet, that's still participating. But yeah, please feel welcome. Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Amit, for sharing the video. Hopefully everyone was able to get some tidbits from that. A couple of key points I wanted to point out from the video, in addition to what I had said prior, is, again, diversity goes beyond physical attributes. It also, there is this notion that you're diverse only if you are a person of color, right? That was said in the video. And I think a lot of people have that preconceived notion that, this particular person is diverse. I'm not, because I fit in with the mainstream, based on, my race, my gender identity, my ethnicity. And that's, we're demystifying that, right? Everybody is diverse in their own way. Whether it's, again, those physical attributes or some of those intangibles like we talked about. So now I really want to go into an exercise. We'll take a few minutes to do an exercise, and I'll explain what that is, and I'll even demonstrate it myself so you can understand, and then hopefully we can maybe get a volunteer or two to share if you feel like sharing. So the exercise is, tell me a little bit about yourself using this definition of diversity. So like we talked about, visible and invisible attributes, as well as maybe something about yourself, your lived experience that defines who you are as a person. that maybe somebody wouldn't have known about you just by seeing you. Okay, so I'll go first. So I was actually born, so my name is Yasmin Virani. I was actually born in Dubai. My dad and my mom are Pakistani, by birth. But my dad actually decided he was going to move to Dubai in the early 70s. And that's where I was born, and I lived there for a good 10 years of my life. I'm also the youngest of three. And so he had, made the decision for the reasons of higher education, that he wanted to give up his career. He had a really good career as an insurance agent working for a great company, and decided that because of higher education and because that was a priority for him and our family, that we would all move to the US, right? So it's really interesting for me. I struggle in terms of background and identity quite a bit, because here I was born in Dubai. Obviously, even though you're born there, you're not considered Arab, right? That's for, those that are born within that, like whether or not you're an Emirati. So I'm not an Emirati, but then I was raised as a Pakistani, and then I moved to the US, and I'm grasping all the different aspects of the culture, going through the culture shock and figuring out who I am as a person. And at the same time, knowing that education was the prime reason for us to move. And so that was always sort of in the backdrop of myself growing up. And hence, I think part of me focused on that and ensured that I wasn't going to let, my parents down in any way, and focus on my education. And so that sort of, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, defines who I am, even today, so that when with my children, even with them, I'm saying education is really important. Your grades have to be at a certain level. And I can sort of see that happening, right? Like passed on. And so I share this because that's an aspect of me that you would not have known just by looking at me, just from a physical attributes, right? So that's just an example. And I was wondering if anyone, maybe one volunteer or two, would feel vulnerable and brave enough to maybe share something about themselves in terms of being diverse that would be different and not something that somebody would just know about you just by looking at you. Anyone?
I'll go, Yasmin.
Sure.
So this is Dr. Mark from the School of Business. And perhaps one of the things that folks don't know about me is that I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. And so throughout my life, my parents were, my mother came from Ohio. I think my dad was born here in Washington, D.C., so we have a lot of local roots. But after being born in Washington, D.C., we moved to Maryland in the late 1950s, so I know I'm dating myself. And then after getting married, my wife and I started our family by moving to this Tysons, Vienna area. So there's not much that's terribly diverse, because I'm a native Washingtonian living in a suburb of Washington, D.C. But however, throughout my career, I've been able to travel internationally. So I've had to sort of up my game a little bit, if you will, to be able to participate in activities both at work and in my personal life. So for me, it has been the ability to change my mind to be able to treat people, equally and equitably. So again, I don't come from a very diverse background, but even in that case, we all have to learn and to be able to accept people, not just in our personal lives, but now that we are preparing you to enter the world of work. I know Ms. Virani will talk about that later, but you're going to come into contact with workers and employees from other cultures that you may not have ever experienced. So this is a really, I think, important issue that in the workplace, the workplace is as diverse, if not more so, than in society.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. I enjoyed that. Even though you mentioned that, it's not anything diverse, but it's always good to sort of learn about someone's background and, what's shaped them. So I really appreciate that. Is there anyone else that would like to share? I'll take one more volunteer if there is a brave soul that would like to share something. Okay. And if not, that's fine too. We'll have other opportunities to share. So again, just to sort of summarize this slide, the world is a global village. We've heard that. But within that global village, we have to make room for various aspects of diversity, right? Whether you are a person of color, which is, wonderful if you are, and you have so many different aspects about you that you want to share, and those that maybe are not, but still have various aspects of difference within themselves, right? That we are celebrating and incorporating within our society. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so the next piece of DEI is the E, which is equity. And wanted to break this down a little bit because I know that there can be confusion, right? There's two terms. There is what we know as equality, and then there is equity. So within the DEI, it's diversity, equity, inclusion. So there is a difference between the two, and they cannot be used interchangeably, meaning equality versus equity. So what do I mean by that? So we have this lovely image that's there. And I think this picture, the old adage that they say that a picture speaks 1,000 words. And I think it could not be truer for this particular picture. And this is almost like a very iconic picture that's used to explain the concept of equity. And what I mean by here is that you will see on the left side of the picture, right? You have, 3 people that are there trying to watch a baseball game. And you have 3 boxes, 3 stools that are there. So in terms of equality, what that means is, well, everyone gets equal access, right? If one person receives 1 box, so does the other, so does the other. So that's equal distribution of resources. Equity is not equality, right? And the reason for that is that you still have 3 boxes. However, you are now looking at it from a situational perspective, right? So what is the fairness aspect in this particular situation? And where does each individual come in terms of their capabilities, their abilities, their own attributes that would allow them to be able to, in this case, watch the baseball game? So what you can see here is that, again, 3 boxes, the same 3 boxes, but they're situated differently so that, the middle person still gets the 1 box because he, is able to see the game still using that 1 box. The first person, the box was taken away from him and given to the last, in this case, a little toddler, to be able to have 2 boxes to see the game, right? So it was the same resources that were used, but they were shifted around in order to make it fair for everyone and to give them access. Now, a lot of times what happens when this concept first came out, right, in the working world, and people were trying to distinguish, okay, what do you know, it's equality. What do you mean? Like, why do I have to worry about equity? And in actuality, you know, there were people that were saying that, well, that's not fair because you're taking something away from someone. But that's really not the case. You're not, just like this picture. Are you taking something away from the first person? You're really not. Even though the box was taken away from him, he's still able to watch the game and he's still able to enjoy just as he was before, right? So this is the concept of equity versus equality, right? So if I were to use a definition, equity enables all to give their best without any barriers through fair and impartial processes. And it's that premise that not everyone is in the same position. Okay, so that hopefully I hope that that expresses a little bit more about the difference between equality and equity and why that's, you know, important. When we are talking about DEI, I'll share a little bit more about why that's important. But in this particular instance, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that there is a difference between the two. And even though equality has its place in society, when we're talking about DEI, it's actually equity that a lot of workplaces now, I would say, hopefully we will get to the point where all workplaces are thinking about equitable access versus just equality. So there's one more slide on the concept of equity that I want to share, which is the next slide. And this one is takes the first concept to the next level, right? So here you can see that, again, you know, 3 boxes, but here you have, you know, a gentleman there, a young girl, and then a differently abled person. In this case, you know, at least from what I can presume, an older lady or maybe a lady that's in a wheelchair, right? And so in this case, if the 3 boxes were there, well, and even if you shifted it around, that box really does not give that last individual the access that they need, right? And so in this case, a ramp was actually built for them to be able to watch the game, right? And again, we're kind of talking in examples and using pictures, but in reality, this has become a big issue and a major sort of ideology that's come to workplaces, right? So they shifted from, you know, first where it was equality, we got to make sure, right? Like we're giving everybody, we're being fair, to then, you know, being equitable, right? So you may have, if you're seeing things, different articles, you will notice that, you know, workplaces now want to make sure that they are going to possibly historically underrepresented schools to ensure that, you know, their pool of applicants is diverse enough and they're considering different aspects. I've seen where, you know, before when you needed a master's degree or an MBA to be able to even be considered for a position, now workplaces are going, well, what about if we think about lived experiences, right? When we were talking about diversity, what kinds of experiences does this person bring? Maybe they've done, you know, some sort of working environment that they've been in where they've applied themselves within the same concept. Maybe we should consider those. So that would be where they're really practicing equity. And then to this concept, right, this idea of access, their workplaces are taking it to the next level now, where they're going, okay, not only do I want to, you know, be equitable, I want to provide access. So there may be applicants that, you know, again, are differently abled, right? Whether they're, you know, in a wheelchair due to a disability, or they're not able to hear or see, or they're neurodivergent, which is another new concept that's coming about within the world of DEI, which is, again, something that's not visible, but it's a person that interacts and learns in a different manner, and may need, additional resources and tools to be able to allow them to work. And so here we are, right? We want to be able to make everyone within the society feel welcome, no matter where they are, within their own aspect of diversity and within society, right? So we're slowly shifting to that aspect of a just world, right? Like one of the things that the professor said in the video that we saw for diversity is that, you start with diversity and then you move to inclusion, and then only can you get to social justice, right? So it's a journey, and slowly as a society we're moving, but there are things that are in place that are allowing this, and I'm really happy to see that within the world, and hopefully things will continue to get better. Okay, so with that, next slide, please. Okay, so here we're going to talk about inclusion, so demystifying inclusion, which is, again, the last piece of the DEI acronym. And so what do we mean by inclusion? And I'll give you an analogy here. This had been coined by a diversity practitioner several years ago, and it's used to this day, where they say that think about diversity as being invited to the party and inclusion as being asked to dance, right? So you're invited to the party, and that's great. You get hired in a workplace, that's great, but inclusion is taking it to the next level. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So in a workplace, inclusion would be making you feel safe, welcome, giving you the opportunities to advance your career, right? Giving you leadership opportunities, including you in different meetings, allowing you the opportunity to lead, right? All of those things are what really makes the environment inclusive. And so, as you can see on this slide here, inclusion enables individuals to feel safe, respected, and valued for their contributions. And a lot of times people confuse diversity and inclusion, and I can kind of see the gray area and the blurriness between the two. But there is a difference, and it's like I mentioned, it's a journey. And then, of course, there's equity in there now too, which, interestingly enough, before, this field used to be called D&I, meaning just the D and the I. And then, again, as a journey, we moved, and now it's DEI. And then you will even see maybe DEIJ, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. So all these different, aspects of DEI that are sort of growing. But for the most part, I've seen that it's continuing to be called DEI at this point. So what we'll do is let's just pause here, and I have a great video on inclusion, and then I want to have a discussion on it. So Amit, if you can please show the video for inclusion.
There are people out there that would consider me, quote unquote, I hate this word, but a terrorist.
As an Indigenous person, you were known as somebody who potentially could be a drunk, have substance abuse issues.
Being Indian, they have expected me to know a lot about computers.
It's sometimes a really unique experience navigating the world as a person with a disability who looks to be completely able-bodied.
He made a comment about, well, don't worry about this that's going on because you won't be here too much longer. You'll be off having your next baby soon.
Most women are, told they need to behave a certain way.
People really think that my generation is lazy.
Just another blonde waitress.
Hey, do you rap?
The only black girl.
I didn't belong.
I guess kind of growing up, people made these assumptions about what I was supposed to be, but it was really eye-opening for me to realize that I had been making those same assumptions myself.
We all like to think that we're inclusive, but Sometimes we don't actually step back and think, wait a second, did I hear everybody in the room?
I mean, don't judge is the message, but it's also hard not to.
I always thought that every gay man was flamboyant and rude.
The older generation is set in their ways.
Initially, I thought there was something weird about a girl who would want to be a camera operator because of the word cameraman, and we still have to work past these things and stuff.
I went into the school on my first day, and there's these little girls, and they're wearing hijabs, and I was really intimidated by that.
Have your initial judgments, but also be willing to learn.
My definition of inclusion is a world and a society in which constructed barriers have been torn down.
Inclusion for me is setting up an environment where everybody is comfortable.
Open to accept other people's opinions.
All individuals, regardless of their diversity, feel welcomed, feel respected.
It means that they don't have to try to be what others expect them to be.
Change is possible, but it takes the right person to make a change happen.
I had a shop floor supervisor who stood up for me and sent out a company-wide email saying that Robin has every legal right to use the women's change rooms. It's funny because you do find allies in some of the strangest places.
One thing we can do to support inclusion is to talk about it.
You have to demonstrate that you're committed to this.
Get to know people around you. Do something different. Learn something different. Learn about a culture.
Different races, different religions, different belief systems, and see what there's good in all those things.
Be an active listener. That's one of the things I practice with other immigrants as well.
Open up your mind and take your time and get to know someone. Instead of putting them in this box, is showing that interest. It's going to surprise you.
Ask me a stupid question. I don't care if it's a stupid question, just ask me.
I'm an open book and willing to answer them.
I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it as a teachable moment.
Just ask me how to pronounce my name.
It's simple. You decide that other people's feelings and experiences matter.
We need to have more uncomfortable conversations so that we can drive more inclusion. And oftentimes, it's not easy.
We're not there, but certainly we're on the right track.
And it's important, otherwise change will never happen.
My name is Shomodip Ganguly, but people call me Sam.
I am Layla Karem.
Mutsa Matanga.
Miss Geneviève Leblanc.
Ashley Pasila.
Patrick Duff. Neil McLaughlin.
Alina Gotchling.
Rod Bolger.
Jessica Shu.
Kazim Marcano. I'm a chef and I forge metals.
A proud mother.
Forklift operator and a truck driver.
I envision a day when we can just be so accepting of each other, where we can make space for others.
Great. Thank you, Amit, for sharing that video. I really like that video because I think it does such a great job of putting it out there in terms of what does it really mean to be inclusive of others, right? At the same time, highlighting what you may have gone through, right? It kind of makes you wonder, you know, did you go through a moment where you felt you were judged or stereotyped? And at the same token, maybe you judged someone or you stereotyped someone or made an assumption about something. So I think it does a really good job of coming at it, you know, from both angles in terms of, you know, what does it really mean to be inclusive and how do we get there? And the how do we get there is what was the kind of, you know, maybe mentioned it right at the end of the video where they said, well, you know, you have to get uncomfortable before you get comfortable. And again, that's another phrase that really took off in the corporate world. And I'll tell you when it took off, right when, you know, we were in the midst of the pandemic and then the murder of George Floyd happened, right? And so a lot of organizations were sort of clamoring to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Because so many people feel vulnerable in this moment and are not feeling safe. And all of these things were happening. And so what can we do? And what a lot of companies did, whether right or wrong, mostly right, because I think their intent was in the right place, was to have, you know, an opportunity to come together for a safe space. And of course, during that time, it was virtual because of the pandemic. But what was happening was, these focus groups of people coming together and talking about, one, how they were feeling based on what just happened, and how do we make a better environment, right? And I share that because I think that's a good example, maybe some sort of an analogy of what needs to happen in general in terms of the idea of inclusion is, create an opportunity and a space that allows others to feel safe and vulnerable and feel like they can share things about themselves without, being judged in a certain manner. So I'll share something, about myself that I went through. And I know a lot of other women had gone through this, where in the working world, when I was pregnant with my first child, I was really big, really uncomfortable. I wanted to, work my hours that I was there, but for the most part, maybe I wanted to leave early on some days because I was just feeling uncomfortable and I maybe needed to lay down. And in actuality, my first pregnancy was very difficult. But I think this was also in my mind where I felt like, are people judging me because maybe I'm leaving early and they think or have this perception that I'm not doing the work that I need to do, and maybe I'm getting an unfair advantage because I am pregnant, right? Or maybe there were instances where I had that feeling of someone sort of maybe giving me that look or making me feel like, why are you getting this get out of jail free card, right? To be able to do this. That's not fair. Like, I'm not, I'm a man and I'm not able to do that, right? Like, so there's so many things that could happen where people feel a certain way inside when maybe that's really not the case, or maybe it is the case because someone is sort of giving them that vibe of not, feeling like it's okay, you're in this particular situation, or you have something about yourself, your family, you're a caretaker, what have you. There could be so many things, right? So I share this because I want you to maybe take this moment to think about, have you possibly done that to someone else, maybe in an unconscious manner? And what you can do to be better. So I actually had an opportunity for an exercise, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip that exercise because I do really want to get through the next few slides and also leave room for Q&A. So Amit, if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so a shift here, right? So we talked about DEI, defined the terms, demystified them a little bit. And now you're going, you're sitting here, you're participating in this webinar and thinking, okay, this is all great, but why does it matter to me now? How do I take this information and what benefit does it provide to me? And I wanted to share some points here so you can see why it's beneficial, right? So in terms of this environment that you are in right now as a student of Washington University of Science and Technology, DEI is important because it allows you to create an environment where all of you can thrive, right? Where all of you can succeed. And there's actually been research done in this, right, on campuses to show that when the students, meaning, all of you and even the faculty, when you experience a sense of belonging within your environment, all your outcomes are going to improve, right? Whether they're your academic, your health, your engagement, all of those outcomes increase. In addition, you can build inspired teams. So I'm sure there's a lot of teamwork, group work that's happening, and there's a lot of diverse thoughts and perspectives and backgrounds that could be used and utilized in a positive manner, right? And again, developing faster and effective problem solving and creating that safe environment. And funny enough, these things that matter to you now as a student are also the same things that are going to matter to you when you get out there in the working world, right? So same thing for companies and workforces. They're trying to build inspired teams. They care about, productivity and profitability. All of those things matter, right? And within the last few years, because of this spotlight that has been put on DEI, all of these companies, top consulting firms like McKinsey and Bain, all these companies started doing research, right? And this is what they do best. Like, they do research and they put together analysis and graphs, and they do surveys and figure out. So all, over a period of time, they did all this and figured out, oh my God, by focusing on diversity, by focusing on equity, by having inclusive practices, you're actually increasing your profits, you're increasing your ROI, you're increasing your profitability, your productivity, your customers are more loyal. Like, this is like the holy grail that people didn't really even know about, and it actually matters, right? So going from the, this is really all fluff, to no, this actually is really important. And for you as a student, I want you to sort of take that away, that, this is not just a feel-good exercise, although it does, I won't lie, it does make you feel good, and it makes you feel that you're sort of doing the right thing, but it actually matters towards the bottom line too. So that's sort of the beauty of focusing on DEI. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so taking that to the next level, right? So why does DEI matter to you? So we talked about that. Okay, so what can you do, right? What is your part that you can play to create that environment, that culture of respect and empathy? So I want this to be inclusive, right? I'm not just speaking to the students here, but for the faculty that are on this call, and maybe hopefully this can be shared with those that aren't there. It's equally important for the faculty to create that inclusive environment, create that environment of respect and empathy. So how do you go about doing that? You need to get to know your students at a personal level, right? It's great that you may be teaching a particular topic, but how well do you know, your students to the level that maybe you are able to know them? Join them maybe in some of their group meetings that they may be having, instead of just, sort of being separate, and allowing them to come to your office, which is great that you have, you may have office hours and allow them, but how about actually going within their group and sitting with them, right? There is a difference there. Acknowledging and respecting every student. So in terms of their background, in terms of their diversity, like we talked about, things that you may not know, taking the time to get to know them and acknowledging and respecting every student. For all of us, practicing cultural sensitivity and creating a culturally responsive learning environment. So I'm making a big assumption here, but because I know that there is a very sort of diverse, in terms of, where you're coming from, population at the school, that there may be a lot of that going on already, and I would totally encourage that, and maybe even take it to the next level of furthering your knowledge of cultures that you may not know about, and creating that environment. There is an engaged feedback checklist from Brene Brown that I really like. It's a PDF, so I will share that with Mark and Amit after the call, the webinar today, and I would love for all of you, when you have your meetings, to maybe have that as a backdrop in the back of your head, in terms of what you can do to create a more engaged feedback environment within your group meetings. And then benefits of these actions, right? Like, great, you're going to do all these things. What does it do? It creates open-mindedness. It provides confidence and safety. And last but not least, you are better prepared for a diverse workplace and environment. So you're already practicing all of these things that you're really going to be taking to your workplace as well. So just some food for thought there. And then the last slide, please, before we go into closing. So how will DEI help me in my career? So I hit upon some of these things already as I was talking. But I want to really emphasize that DEI will help you in your career. And the reasons for that is, like I mentioned, right, especially in the last 3 years since the pandemic and since the murder of George Floyd, there has been a stark uptick, in DEI and companies focusing on DEI and ensuring that, they're giving the attention to DEI in terms of different practices, policies, structures, right? So you already know that that's happening in the background, and here you are as a student preparing yourself for the working world. But this sort of gives you a window into what are companies doing, right? What's happening in the outside world. So, like I said, rapidly growing movement among employers to not only, provide that equitable access, but they're also requiring job applicants to demonstrate, how are you going to be committed to DE&I? I will not be surprised if some of your interview questions when you go out to interview for different positions have that as a question. They may ask you, Mr. or Miss X, how have you demonstrated DEI within your campus environment, and what are some of those attributes that you're going to bring to this company and this corporation that's going to be beneficial to us? And you have to be ready to answer that, right? What are you going to say? DEI is seen both as a competency and an asset. So if you can answer those questions, and maybe even on your resume, you're able to show how you were able to sort of demonstrate the idea of DEI, whether in your work or in your coursework, that is definitely seen as a competency and an asset. And then your soft skills, right? I think, Mark, we talked about this, and I know that, which is great, a lot of students are very much focused on the technical skills and attributes, which is great. They absolutely should be focused on that in terms of their particular line of work, coursework that they're taking, their degree that they're focusing on. But I don't want you to lose sight of those soft skills that are just as important, right? And what kinds of soft skills am I talking about? I'm talking about being able to effectively communicate, being an advocate, right? So when you're seeing things that are happening in the workplace that you automatically know are not fair, or somebody is not being treated well, this is what they call allyship, which is another term that's used, where you can, be an ally for someone, right? You can advocate for someone. They're looking for that. Corporations want that because, remember, they want to ensure that their environment is safe and inclusive. Attributes of integrity, of honesty, flexibility, teamwork, cultural awareness, all of these are going to matter, I would say, just as much to your technical skills. So I would highly recommend maybe incorporating that in your own way, maybe on your resume when you're thinking about putting things together. And then last but not least, think about how you would build those skills now, right? Now that you're, as a student, how would you build these skills so that you can reflect them and showcase them in when you are ready to go on in terms of honoring your degree and moving on to the real world in terms of your work. So be thinking about what you can do as well. So with that, I don't know if we've run out of time, Mark. I did have one last video, but we don't have to show it if we don't have time, and we can go into Q&A.
Well, we have 2 minutes left. We don't have to end precisely at 2:15. We can ask questions now, or you can show your video if we want to make that the last part of the webinar.
The video is actually pretty powerful, so I would love to show that. It's not that long, so if folks do want to stay after for Q&A, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, if you want to show the video, great. I will need to head off in a couple of minutes, but Amit is here, he can, end the session today. But before I go, I just want to make sure that we thank Yasmin for her stellar presentation today. I hope we all learned a lot. I know I did. And as she said, it's going to be extremely important that when you go out and interview in the world of work here within at least the Washington D.C. area, if not other places around the country, that is going to be a definite topic of discussion in job interviews. And you may find that recruiters or hiring managers may wish to give you a phone call called a screening call, right? And they may ask you in the screening call whether or not you've had experience in this issue. So it's really important. Hopefully in the next year or so, we can revise our courses here, our HR concentration, to reflect more of the DE&I needs. Let me stop. Do you want to show the video, Yasmin? Thanks everybody for joining. I have to leave, but please stay on and enjoy the video.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Open a door and it opens all the others. Open a mind and see what happens next. No great thing, no beautiful invention was created in a vacuum. It happens when we leave our comfort zone and come together. Embrace faiths, cultures, disabilities, differences. Embrace races, ages, ideologies, personalities, creating a tool or device nobody saw coming. Humanity is plural, not singular. The best way the world works is everybody in, nobody out. So who we're made of is everyone. Differences not just celebrated, but essential. Many more women in charge. Equal pay for equal work everywhere. A new generation of Apple, more diverse than the one that came before. Open is not just who we are, but what we believe as a company. Because humanity isn't singular, it's plural. The truth is, we don't see things the same. The power is, we don't see things the same.
Great, thank you, Amit. If you can just go to the one slide right before Q&A.
From the very beginning, we have been a collective of individuals.
Which one?
Just the one slide before.
Yes.
Yeah, right there. So yeah, I'll end my presentation today with the thought from the video. I love that video. It's by Apple. And some of the key things they said were so powerful, right? They said humanity isn't singular, it's plural. The truth is we don't see things the same. And that same statement is also a power, that we don't see things the same. And so, in this whole presentation today, I hope that you've taken that away from, just sort of opening your mind and your heart to the idea of DEI, what it means for you, maybe some aspects of yourself that you may not have considered as diverse, maybe aspects of yourself where you may have unconsciously judged someone or may have, felt like you were judged, thinking about those and how it made you feel. how we can be more equitable in our society, and then thinking about what DEI means to you now as a student and what you're going to take away with you as you move on within your careers. So definitely wanted to share that. And I know we're over time, but I am happy to take any sort of questions if someone has them. So any questions? Don't be shy. You can ask me anything you feel like.
Ma'am, I have a question. I'm Lutfu Rahman.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are lots of opportunity in United States, but the diversity of this country, the communication is a very great factors towards this country for working in a situation and environment. So how can we improve our skills for developing our career to communicate with other colleagues and other uh, organizations by attributes ourselves and to explore ourselves? Can you suggest us some tips and tricks for getting more closer to the uh, advertiser, to the other organization, for working, for showing our inner things that we can work together? How can we improve our skills?
Okay, great. So I think what I want to make sure I understand the question is what you're asking is, given the idea and the prevalence of DEI within our environment, how can you improve your communication skills and showcase to employers that you want to, that you have good communication skills, that you're able to show that you're, I guess, accepting of DEI? Is that the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so great. Thank you for asking. Really good question. So I know that one thing I already shared, which I will share after this, and hopefully Mark and Amit can share this with you, is it's called the Engage Feedback List, and it allows you to think through when you go into a meeting or when you're in a group setting, how do you ensure to include others, right? So I'm glad you asked this, because a lot of times what happens in meetings is that those with a particular personality, right? Whether, and it's not their fault, right? Somebody could be extremely extroverted, very outgoing, very talkative, and you come into a meeting, and this happens all the time, right? Whether it's maybe within your campus or in a working environment where those people are sort of taking over the meeting, constantly sharing their thoughts. And, unfortunately, those are the ones that are seen as, oh my God, this person is, so active, and they have so many ideas, and they're so eager, and this is the right person. And then it becomes sort of a snowballs into, then in a working environment, that person maybe gets promoted, right? Because they're the ones who spoke up and they got the opportunity. And the next thing you know, there's another person who maybe is just as knowledgeable, just as eager, just as diligent, but because of their personality, they're not the type to speak up, but they still have ideas. So what you need to showcase is that, you know what, I want to make sure that everyone feels safe to be able to participate in however, in whichever manner they want to. So maybe your whole meeting and the way that it's structured is you also allow for a moment of, people writing down their thoughts and maybe sharing it around in a circle. And so those that are leading the meeting, or maybe like a higher up, can also see their ideas, right? So I'm just giving you an example here, but the things that you need to do when you're thinking about DEI and how to engage and how to show is that you are thinking about everybody's skill set, diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, physical differences, right? So for example, we were talking about inequity. If somebody is literally, on a wheelchair, and let's say you have to go to a particular meeting and there's no ramp there. There's no way for that person to get inside the building. So what happens, right? So now that person maybe who was extremely knowledgeable in that topic was maybe going to lead the meeting, cannot go into the meeting because they literally physically cannot go into the meeting. So did you think about that in advance? Were you proactive in making sure that the space was physically inclusive? So there's that aspect. It's almost like before you go into any sort of activity or engagement or anything that you do, you're taking a step back and thinking about, who am I going to be interacting with? What are their attributes? Maybe that I know about, or maybe I don't even know about. So now I need to find out about those attributes. And how can I make them feel more inclusive, right? So now, like Mark was saying, when you go into an interview and you maybe get a screening call and this question may come up, well, now guess what? You have a response to that. You can share an example about, what? There was a meeting that I had to run, or there was a group that I was in charge of, and I am so proud of the fact that I made sure that everyone felt inclusive regardless of their physical attributes, or any other types of attributes that was different. And I made sure that the environment was, capable and accustomable to all of those differences. And we had a wonderful meeting, and these were the outcomes that came out. Well, now you've just showcased to the interviewer that, wow, you actually thought about that in advance, and you actually made some actionable changes to that, right? So just, giving you these small tidbits of things that you can do to demonstrate that you are being inclusive, that you are thinking about these things. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I just wanted to share an example of what is a way that you could do that.
Another question, ma'am. We are facing trouble when we go to interview that we cannot explore ourselves. That we know that knowledge, we have the knowledge. But in a sitting moment, in face-to-face conversation, that makes very trouble. And also, we come from different countries, so we have different linguistics, so we have different communication barriers. This is very trouble for making us to to contribute ourselves that we cannot explore. We know we have the good confidence. We cannot show the confidence. So this is very tough for me as a student. Right now, I'm doing my MBA program from WUST, and I already completed my 3 quarter. Now I'm the 4th quarter, but I'm still deserving that. I cannot explore myself, but in back home, I worked. I can talk with my employer, and I make them impressed, and then I got also job. But right now, this is the different scenario that I faced in this country.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm, that's unfortunate, and I'm sure that still happens in some companies where, because maybe of your accent or the way that you're coming across, that you're being looked upon or judged in a manner that should not be the case. But again, from my knowledge and experience, I know that is definitely a big thing right now, where companies and corporations are actually taking the steps to be even more careful within that, right? Because they want to make sure that they are not in any position to show that, they unlawfully discriminated against someone because of their accent or the way that they were communicating, even though they had all of the skill set, all of the capabilities, all of the background, the education, everything, right? Like now there are actually policies within HR, right, that are there where HR is actually looking at like, okay, if these were your candidates, right, and you went with a certain person and not with another candidate, they actually have to explain and say, okay, this cannot just be I decided that I like, Pam better than Jack, and so I went with Pam. Like, that can no longer be the case, right? They have to document everything. They have to show, why they went with a particular candidate versus another. So to your case, maybe you went through that experience, but I know that things are definitely looking better in the environment in that sense of people being definitely more conscious of making sure that they're not discriminating somebody just based on that. And I would even encourage you that, like, let's say you're in an interview, right? And you're feeling like somebody asked you a question, the interviewer asked you a question, and you felt that, you know what, I feel like I'm not getting across in the manner that I want to. Maybe because of my accent or the way that I'm saying what I am right now. And I would challenge you to tell the interviewer, thank you very much, Mr. Interviewer. I really appreciated the opportunity to share with you, my response to this question. May I also please, be able to write my response on a computer? Because I just want to make sure that I have answered your question and you're able to fully understand me. And I can guarantee you that that interviewer is not going to say no, right? They will actually appreciate that and say, oh, wow, this candidate is actually considering whether or not I can understand this person fully. And so they would like to take it to the next step and even maybe write something, right? Like on a computer, like you could just write your response that could be something given in addition to what you said. So there's many things that you can do that actually will showcase as a positive for you as a candidate, because then they're thinking about, okay, this person is actually considering how the interviewer is possibly perceiving me and making sure that, I am able to get across. So, that's just maybe a tip that I would have for you if you felt that again in another interview. Hopefully that won't happen again. But if you did, that's something that you could put forth, as an idea just to try out and see if that's something that could work. Any other questions? Oh, you're welcome. I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. Yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think awareness is very important. It's actually one of the first steps towards creating change, right? So you have to become knowledgeable and aware before you can make changes. So Amit, I know that you will be sharing this recording and the slides, or how
Yeah,
you're welcome to do that.
yeah. So after the presentation, I will going to share the PowerPoint presentation and all the 3 videos, and as well as the recording of this meeting.
Okay, and I will send you the engaged feedback checklist.
Okay.
If you can also please include
Also,
that.
okay. Sure, I will include that one too.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, Miss Yasmin, for your time. And this was a like really nice presentation. And we got the good members on this event. And hopefully we can do it more, maybe next semester. So I will be in a
Yes.
touch with you and with Mark Robinson. So hopefully we will have more session next semester.
Thank you so much. I would be delighted to do another one, and it could be on a specific topic that people are interested in within DEI, and we can chat some more
Yeah,
on that.
exactly. Thank you everyone for joining. You have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you,
Thank
Miss
you.
Yasmin.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.